Alright, I just want to show you guys a sharpening jig I made for my knife. I did a video about making a heat treat kiln and how to heat treat O1. This is a knife that I made. It's a, well, you could consider it a drop point, kind of small hunting knife. It's got a nice little contour for your finger and then a little contour for your finger behind it. Got stainless steel bolsters. It's got kind of a, the light's giving me a little bit of a glare. I'll move that out. It's got kind of this tiger stripe maple handle. You can see that, but anyway, I mainly want to show you the sharpening jig. What we've got here, we've got a cut going through to a round, which lets the wood flex, and then that bolt lets me clamp down on the blade, and then I've actually filed into the head of that bolt. You see it, I take the file and I put the file on the bar and I file that down with no knife in it, so that I can get it out of the way for the sharpening. And then I've got 2.5 inch wide wooden block, and you can just buy like your stock 2.5 inch wide sandpaper, use some spray adhesive and stick it to the block, and you've got yourself like an instant stone for knife sharpening. You drill a 1/2 inch hole. I've got a 1/2 inch rod going through an eyelet, and I can adjust the height of that eyelet or the position of the eyelet on the piece of wood. So it's pretty easy to make, pretty handy sharpening jig. And I'm just going to show you. So I put it in, I've got the coarser side down, and I'm just going to file on that guy like that. I'm going to file on that edge until I grind it down, and I'm going to flip it over. I'm going to do the same thing, and I don't know if you can see this, but that gives me a nice consistent flat edge right there with my grind, which is hard to do when you're doing this by hand. I'm sure you guys that have attempted to sharpen know that. And then the other thing, I've got some silicone spray, which is real handy when this thing starts to make a lot of squeaks. I will just spray some of that on the rod, slide it in, and then listen to that. All of a sudden it's nice and smooth. Hear that? So then the last thing I'm going to show you, when you're sharpening, like I said, you want to keep it even. You're going to grind down. I can't tell where my finger is. I don't want to cut myself. Part of this blade is pretty sharp. You're going to grind down one side, and if you're removing material, you're going to want to flip over and remove the same amount of material from the other side. But when you get close to having the edge remade, you're going to feel underneath right here. If I'm grinding on this top side, I'm going to feel underneath on the bottom side, and you should feel a little bit of a burr on the bottom. When you start to feel that burr, see, I can feel the burr right here. I can't feel it so much here. I can feel it on the tip. But what you want to make sure is that you can feel that burr all the way down the entire edge. And it doesn't really matter what side the burr comes up on. In other words, I'm grinding this side, I flip it over, I grind the other side. If it's flipped over, I want to feel that burr down the entire edge. Once you get the burr down the entire edge, you know that you've gotten that blade point all the way together. You don't have any spots where there's a little microscopic flat, and that's what you need for a really sharp blade. So once you get to that point, you're going to flip over to your finer grit, and I've tried to put my hole in the middle so that I'm right on the same angle either way. And with my finer grit, what I'm going to do is I'm going to work backwards. I'm going to work away. Okay, when I'm on the coarser grit, I'm going to grind back and forth like that. I'm going to grind back and forth until I feel the burr down the entire edge, and then when I get to the finer grit, I'm going to work backward like that. I'm going to work away from the cutting edge, not toward the cutting edge. Okay, and I'm going to flip it over. I'm going to do that on both sides, and then when I'm done with that, take your leather, just like you normally would to strop the blade. I'll show you that here in a second. Show you something there. This blade, you see how the bolsters have like this 15-degree angle, which really keeps the wood on the handle from ever coming out. And I think it's a really nice design. My daughter actually made this design, and then we made a case for it. Anyway, after you do, like I say, work backward with that fine grit, and you've got your edge, one of the things people say is to knock the burr off. So you can take like a piece of wood and just slice down, and that'll help where if there's any material sticking off the edge, that'll knock it off. And then once you do that, you can take on your fine grit, and by hand you can stroke backward a little bit, carefully, away from the cutting edge. And sometimes that helps just to tune it up a little bit more. But then you're going to go to the leather strop. I can do this, and then you're going to work that edge backward. There's a couple of grits that you can get to put on this thing. You're going to work backward like that, and you're going to have a knife sharp enough to shave with before too long.